You're listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Jonelle Elgaway.
Good evening and welcome to the Doctor's Corner on Caw 360 Network. I'm your co-host, Jonelle Elgaway. If you have a question tonight for Dr. Kline or our special guest, Amara, on the topic of Oregon legislation, please call in at 415-915-2291. You can also chat live with our audience on the YouTube channel Conspiracies Against Wellness livestream. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. Kline and our guest, Amara, to the Doctor's Corner. How are you both this evening?
I'm just Sandy.
Good. And sorry about the audio tech issues here. So, Amara, we're going to start out. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with advocating for chronic pain patients?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I think with a lot of people and other advocates, it starts out with a personal experience. I've been a pain patient now since 2003, and I moved to Oregon in 2003, so it kind of just coincided. And then in 2005, I kind of became aware of some health conditions I had. Convincing them to let me stay on as a patient with all the research I did. But I didn't want to end up staying there anyway, so I ended up contacting an old doctor who helped me find another provider. But that began my advocacy, was my experience with that.
So, all right, so currently right now, can patients get medications in Oregon, pain medication?
Like the rest of the country, it's bad everywhere. It's especially bad in Oregon. Doctors are overall retiring early, as was the case with my old doctor. They're being pressured not to prescribe, and insurance, I think private insurance is still covering it as far as I know. So, and then we've got the Medicaid issue now.
Yeah. Would you talk about what is going on with this Medicaid issue and explain it to the audience?
Sure. So back in 2016, we had the Oregon Opioid Guidelines Task Force, and that was run by our state epidemiologist, Katrina Hedgeberg, and they basically implemented the CDC guidelines. And in the same year, 2016, Medicaid, or the Oregon Health Plan, and Health Evidence Review Commission, which is HERC for short, did kind of their phase one, which was the back and spine lines, Note 60, which was, it was kind of like a soft implementation of what they're doing now, which is to kind of gauge how it was received, but they still allowed exceptions in certain cases, like in my case still. They have basically allowed some alternatives to be brought in, but I would say probably about 50% of the conditions of back and spine have been tapered off. or reduced at this point that are on Medicaid under Note 60.
Okay. Dr. Kline, did you know about what's going on in Oregon? And if you did, when did you start hearing about that?
Yeah, it was a couple of months ago when Amara, emailed me, because I used to live in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And when I lived in Oregon, I lived there for 10 years, and it's where I got my PhD at the University of Oregon in Eugene. And, I really liked living in Oregon because I felt like they had a humane government. And, it was a little bit liberal and at times a little conservative, and it was a nice balance. Taking people off medicines who are on Medicaid, who are disabled and poor, is heinous.
Yes.
That's destroying human life, either functional life or real life. The number of suicides is increasing every month. And for people with painful disease, for which the only treatment is pain medicine, to take them off against their will is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree.
That a government in Oregon, a state that has a wonderful reputation, would even consider such a thing is beyond belief.
Why do you think they decided to try it in Oregon first? Does anybody know?
No, I think each state just continues on with the hysteria. Do something. Run, Chicken Little. The sky is falling in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the sky is falling in? Well, let's all get umbrellas. This is the kind of mentality that's going on. And where are the lawyers?
Mm-hmm.
For God's sake, you can't take people on Medicaid off medicines. How about the people that are, that are disabled? This is a protected class issue. You can't discriminate against people because they're on Medicaid. It would be it'd be as bad, but they could just ban medicines for everybody in the state. At least that would not be discriminatory.
Yeah.
You can't take a group of people and discriminate against them in their health care and pull their health care. Good Lord. Is the governor signed off on this plan? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to imagine.
Well,
but if she's signed off on the plan, then she's responsible.
Well, who is above HERC? Do you know?
Yeah, and kind of how this all played out with the back in Spine Lines Note 60 is when I first became aware, and I started doing my testimony.
Mm-hmm.
So under Health Evidence Review Commission, there's little compartments of things like the Oregon Pain Management Commission. There's a Palliative Care, commission as well. And then we have subcommittees under HERC, and under those, they either deal with what's on the prioritized list or what's not on the prioritized list, or if it's a special issue or complex issue, such as chronic pain, they may do an ad hoc task force. And for some reason, I'm not sure why, I have some ideas why they put this chronic pain task force under the value-based benefits subcommittee, which makes it less, the rules a little less, or more loose, the rules. Evidence doesn't have to be quite as proven. And then above HERC, Health Evidence Review Commission, which was basically created by the Oregon Health Authority in 2011 to be in charge of the Oregon Health Plan, what's covered and not covered. Who's above the Oregon Health Plan is our governor.
Okay, so the governor is aware of all this.
Yeah, and has to sign off on it, I guess. Has the Oregon Medical Society been involved?
I know that the Oregon Medical Association even promotes some of the anti-opioid groups on their webpage, which is concerning.
Oh, dear.
There's
another interesting thing that you just mentioned, where the evidence doesn't have to be as strong.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that there's an interesting parallel to that? there were certain courts that were not required to have real tight evidence. As a matter of fact, they were allowed to take what was called astral evidence. And astral evidence was things that people basically thought they saw in dreams. These were the courts in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. There were 20 people hanged because they allowed astral evidence. When they made evidence rules back to the normal court procedures, they stopped hanging people. So any commission that's working on, quote, opinions, because if you don't have evidence, then you're working on opinions. I mean, I have opinions about a lot of things. Maybe I could join the commission.
That's what it appears to be, a lot of opinions.
This is, a lot of opinions, and, we don't make medical policy on opinions. I have a lot of opinions, but I don't act on them because I haven't adjudicated them. I haven't looked up the references. I haven't done the research. I haven't talked to other doctors. And I'll tell you what it is, actually, is I think a lot of chemotherapy is harmful and a waste of money.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go telling people that until I'm sure. And I'm not sure yet. I mean, I'm just operating on that premise. So are the newspapers involved, Amara?
They're starting to be, thankfully. Since last month, on the 19th, we did the protest in front of HERC, the actual building in Salem. And we had Patrick Sharns, who is running for governor and independent, who actually helped bring media. And we have a lot of members from the Oregon Pain Action Group. We're hoping for double or triple that now on Thursday. We're protesting now. The Health Evidence Review Commission was set to vote on this with their value-based benefit subcommittee. How it works is if we had not interjected how we did, and they would have just gone on as they wanted, they would have had the meeting, the two-part meeting on the 9th, where the value-based benefit subcommittee is from 8 until, I believe, going around, but I think till 12 or something like that, or 12:30, and then they basically look over the proposal by the Chronic Pain Task Force. They're not even required to be there, the task force. They just are there to look over the policy, the VBBS. They say if they like it or not, and then they present it to HERC in the afternoon, and then HERC would vote on it, yes or no. Or they'd say, you need to change this part and go back to the drawing board, and then we'll come back and vote on it in another month or two. But because of all the attention, thankfully, and rightfully so, the whole point was getting transparency. They needed a lens on them, and I knew as soon as the information was out there that people would be like, this is outrageous.
Well, and they tried to pass this behind people's backs, didn't they?
For sure. This is all, very much.
How did you learn about it?
In a strange way. So when I go back to when I first started doing advocacy, when there's a few other advocates I was with, when we just showed up randomly for the back and spine lines, Note 60, back in 2016, with the Oregon Pain Management Commission, which again is under HERC, to just interject and testify and say how, again, this is discriminatory. This is classifying as classism, ableism, what have you. This is taking the lowest income and taking their life-saving medication off the prioritized list in one grand sweeping change. So, and at that time they had said they promised they would allow exceptions. It's just another story I'll tell sometime. But so they're required to have a patient representative. There's a lady that presents herself as a patient representative, and I had kept her number and name in my phone. And so a few months back, when actually myself and a few other advocates had learned about Governor Kate Brown's opioid epidemic task force, I had decided to, that's what we focused on first, actually, and then decided to focus on this one once we learned about what was going on. I contacted this lady to find out if there was anything we could, utilize the Oregon Pain Management Commission to help us. Like, there was not any pain representative on the governor's task force. And she kind of just on the side told me she was on this new chronic pain task force with her. She was not very forthcoming with the information, which of course made me want to go investigate. So that's how I
Well,
found
thank
out.
goodness you did, because if you didn't, would have anybody caught this? I mean,
No, I don't think so.
that's crazy. We have a call.
Go
Go ahead, Doctor. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to pull in a call, but
Yeah,
go ahead. I'd like you to finish what you wanted to say first.
it's good you're staying alert. That's what you have to do. In Massachusetts, Lauren DeLuca did the same thing, and she got the worst part of the law defeated, which was basically to hustle all the teenagers out into the country and lock them up, on drug charges. Really just awful stuff going on in the country, and the only thing we can do is fight back. Being black in the 1960s and 50s was a horrible thing. And you know what? We're all going through the same thing. Now it's everybody who's being cut off. But go ahead with the call.
Okay. Caller from area code 502. What is your name and what's your question?
This is a footnote. I just got a 6-page regulation markup from Arkansas where they're going to 50 MMEs.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they can't do that. That's nullification.
This
state cannot.
Medical Practice Act authorizes and goes. This is a regulation markup that I got in the web. Got sent to me on the web tonight. So there's other states going down this similar path.
No, they can't. You cannot nullify a federal law. The federal law established the FDA. The FDA establishes guidelines for all prescription drugs. There is no cutoff on any opioid medicine approved by the FDA. A state cannot override a federal law. They are attempting to override the federal law that established the FDA. That's called nullification.
But you mentioned earlier where are the attorneys?
Yeah.
Where is the ACLU?
Yeah.
It's a situation where some legal authorities have stated that the civil asset forfeiture law is unconstitutional, but as long as it's on the books and not being challenged, they can use it.
No, that's true, but it is being challenged. Now, the other thing you can do, for everybody listening, you can download the actual report from the FDA that says you cannot have a cutoff of any kind because there's no proof that more deaths don't occur below the cutoff as above the cutoff. And it's a public document. All you have to do is Google FDA 2012 -P as in Paul -0818. It's kind of a long document. You can skim through the first part, but Andrew Kolodny and the prop group of lunatic fringe people, as one FDA official characterized them, got turned down at the FDA. The FDA is the regulatory agency set up by federal law to establish guidelines for all prescription drugs. FDA said in that report that I just gave you, cutoffs are not appropriate. So if a state is attempting to set up a cutoff, then they are in violation of trying to override a federal law, and at least you can bring it up in the newspapers and start using the word nullification. That's how we got into the Civil War. The states nullified the federal laws. Okay, it's called a supremacy clause in the Constitution. Can you imagine if states could just override any federal law they felt like overriding and what it would be like? We might as well not have a federal government. So that's why it's set up that way. And any state that sets a limit on the medications is attempting to nullify a federal law. Now, very important to read those things because what they do is they skinch out of it. they'll say, oh, it needs extra attention, or so be careful to read the law. But if they are really setting up a cutoff, go to the newspapers, go to the governor and say, are you nullifying the law? And where are you getting the information about this 50 milligram cutoff? Show me. What studies do you have to show that this saves lives? And there's one more final, very important point.
What's
The
that?
CDC data that's being used is from the street addiction community deaths. People dying in the streets. They are dying of multiple drug overdoses. These are the people with addiction disease. I talked to 5 doctors who do nothing but pain control. All of them had experienced more than 25 years. And I said, how many people, regular people, treated from a doctor's office, who would show up on a computer, who these laws apply to, how many of them overdosed? The answer was none.
Wow.
There has not been a case of an overdose recorded in any standard medical practice. Yes, a few people committed suicide, but that's different. And I have reviewed the literature over the past year. There is no study to show that non-addicted people are dying of an overdose. Therefore, there is no reason to put any restrictions on the medications.
Dr. Kline, I went to the Oregon Health Authority page, and they state that the interagency guidelines on prescribing opioids for pain, which came out in June 2015, what they said is overdose risk is 2 times higher at doses of 30 to 49 milligrams per day and increases to 9 times at 100 milligrams per day. What do you think of this? I mean...
well, I read that study, and it's not true. They are manipulating the data. And again, you got to be careful. What are they talking about? Street overdose death?
Right.
Or are they talking about deaths on people in the general population?
Well, they also stated...
Now, some
go
of
ahead.
it...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, there was another one, too. What was that one?
Yeah, it states, according to the CDC, non-opioid therapies such as acetaminophen, cognitive behavior therapy, exercise, and massage may actually be better and safer than opioid medications. And this is on their
that's all
page.
Yeah, it's it is. I read that in the CDC regulations.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true because they're not comparing it with pain medicine.
Right.
You in order to say that a treatment is safer than pain medicine, you have to do a study and compare the two.
Right.
What they did, all the studies that are in there, because I read them, are comparing like physical therapy to nothing, to placebo, or hypnosis therapy to nothing, placebo. None of those studies compared any of those things with opiates because they know very well they're not going to be as effective. And any person with common sense and any person with long-term painful disease knows very well that physical therapy a lot of times backfires.
Yeah.
And it's also a lot more expensive.
Right.
And the other thing that CDC did, first of all, the CDC is proceeding illegally, trying to set up any kind of doctor prescription recommendations. That's not their job. They don't have a charter to do that. Only the FDA has a charter to do that. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, let's try backup medicines first. Well, that's real good. If you have cancer and you go to your doctor and he says, well, we have this chemotherapy, we're not going to give you the one that works all the time. We're going to give you the one over here that works some of the time and has a lot more side effects because we're not afraid of it.
Hmm.
See, the problem is that the government is afraid of pain medicine, but they're not doctors. And they haven't given it to people, and they haven't seen what happens when you treat painful disease. There's only one treatment for painful disease, and that's pain medicine. There are 30 or so real diseases. These are not just people making it up. There are real diseases. Arachnoiditis from too many injections in the spine. Failed back syndrome. We did a Twitter poll and found out that only 25% of back surgeries were actually effective. So the other 75% are left with a side effect of the bad surgery, which is more pain. And, oh, well, sorry, that happened. These pain medicines, oh, no, you'll get addicted and die. Don't take those, because they probably won't work anyway.
I'm going to take a few calls here. Caller from area code 704. What is your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I just have a quick question. We were talking about how, the governors and different, people could do such things. I was looking at the NC Medical Board and looking at their website and actually did a snipping of it. It states that on the NC Stop Act, chronic pain patients are supposed to be exempt from all of, everything that's going on as far as NC, being force tapered and not being able to get their medication. But yet chronic pain patients are being punished. They're not getting their medication. So I tried to call my governor, and I've tried to write the governor about that. And I've even tried to speak to the NC Medical Board, and they will not respond. What do you do in a situation like that to bring light to the situation so we don't have the same thing that's going on with Oregon here? Because, we definitely have a governor who's going hardcore.
Well, you have to get more people like Amara's doing. You can't do it alone because they think you're a crackpot. But you have to go in there with take 5 or 6 people. That's even better than one, a lot better than one. Palliative care, that's good you brought that up, because palliative care is exempted in Oregon, which means if you're under palliative care or have palliative care diagnosis, you're exempted from all the stuff that they're talking about. So the law in Oregon protects people who are palliative care. What's palliative care? Simple. You have a disease that has no treatment. That's virtually all people with painful disease. If there's a potential that your lifespan can be shortened, lying around on the couch isn't very healthy. Having your blood pressure shoot up because you have untreated pain, you can't sleep at night, so now you got sleep deprivation syndrome and psychiatric side effects. All of those might conceivably shorten your life. And the third criteria is that treatment of the symptom that's bothersome is likely to improve your life. Now, that might be a person who has terrible diarrhea all the time from their GI disease that can't be cured. Could be a person with COPD, it's coughing all the time, or a person in pain. So you relieve the symptoms. That's what palliative care status is. It can be established by any doctor. It's a diagnosis based on those 3 criteria. There are no set criteria anywhere. The legislature, playing doctor, fortunately put that in there, but then didn't define what it is. But that's what it is. Okay. It's taking care of somebody that has an incurable disease. So basically in Oregon, everybody with incurable disease that fits that definition is protected by the law. So that anybody that attempts, including the state, to reduce the medicine for people with palliative care exemption is a violation of the law.
I do have a question, actually, for Dr. Kline on that subject for Oregon.
Sure. Shoot.
There's a confusion because it seems to be that HERC is trying to actually add in more definitions to palliative care, that it has to be life-threatening for it to apply for Medicaid members to be exempt.
Where do they get that? So you see, you got to turn it around rather than trying to defend it. Say, stop. Where did you get this information?
This is from the HERC director. No, yeah, they're making. They're saying that the palliative care and Interdisciplinary Quality of Life Council drafted this statement for the Health Evidence Review Commission, is what they're claiming, just for Medicaid, which seems to me like blatant discrimination.
Yeah, it is. We've got to get lawyers involved. My God, go to the American Civil Liberties Union, press the case. We've got people, they are selecting out people who are on Medicaid. Many of them have protection because they're disabled. So they're in protected class. You can go to the state of Oregon and say you're discriminating against these people, and they say, no, we're not. You say, I'm sorry, they're in a protected class. You have to prove you're not discriminating against these people on Medicaid. There's also federal Medicaid laws. You can't just run your Medicaid, do whatever you want.
That's what they're
you
trying
have
to
to
do.
get, you have to get exceptions. Maybe you can contact your senator with a specific question. Would you check into the legality of making these changes on the Medicaid system? Is that permissible without what's called a waiver? See, if you don't have a waiver, you have to do what the federal guidelines are. And I doubt seriously whether the federal guidelines say, take everybody with a bad back off their medicines. And look at the money we're going to save. My God, these pain medicines are expensive. It's over $1,000 a month. So just think of the medicine we can save. And, I remember a science fiction story that said that the best way to control healthcare costs is to alternately poison every sixth person. They're almost doing that. They're going to cause some people to kill themselves as the drug treatment of choice for chronic pain that's not treated. So it may not be hyperbole to say that, because there will be people who die as a result of these recommendations.
Absolutely.
We have another caller, a caller from area code 423. What is your name and what's your question?
Yes, ma'am. My question is for Dr. Kline. And first of all, I want to thank Dr. Kline for standing up for folks and caring about people. I think if a lot more doctors would do that, things wouldn't be as bad as they are now. But my question for Dr. Kline is, what I'm finding out is that a lot of the pain doctors are going way beneath what the CDC has allotted for proper pain care. In other words, if the minimum is 90 milligrams per new patient for a new patient and 200 or whatever for a chronic patient, a lot of the doctors are going far beneath that. And I have 2 or 3 friends that have gone from, the doctor, since this has occurred, have gone from 50 milligrams down to a maximum in their practice of 30 milligrams. And when the question was asked to them, they are blaming the CDC. And then the question was asked, okay, what guidelines are you going by? And they say, well, the CDC. And then you say, CDC says 90 milligrams. And they say, well, that's the doctor's use standard. And evidently, all the doctors in the entire area are doing that. And so I wonder if those things should not be reported to the CDC, or is the CDC aware of it?
Well, that's a very good point. If everybody wants to find out about the 90 milligrams, I wrote a little paper that's in the words of the CDC officials. And basically, the 90 milligram is only for the first time that you use the medicine. Other than that, it's all optional, and you can do this if you want. So you can find that by Googling the word medium, like medium size, medium. Middle word is Houry, Houry. That's the doctor that made these statements, Houry. And then Kline, Kline. If you Google that, you'll get a document that I wrote, which basically is in their own words. There is no 90 milligram cutoff at the CDC, only a suggestion for first use, not for chronic use. And it's very hard to read the CDC regulations. It took me 3 months because it's 50 single-spaced pages. And based on looking at their supporting references, reading it carefully, checking up on some other references, I've decided that the 90 milligram cutoff, even for first use, is made up. It's fabricated. Period.
So what should he do?
And
What should he do?
Well, okay, he should look up the CDC Scientific Advisory Committee. In other words, go on the web and find out who. Well, I got a better idea. The CDC actually reports to the Surgeon General. The Surgeon General is their boss.
So should we be talking to him?
You should be talking to the Surgeon General's office. I would put in complaints to the Surgeon General. Now, the Surgeon General so far has made fairly neutral statements. He's certainly not an anti-opiate pain medicine person. So, I mean, he's the boss. I always say when you're in trouble, try to figure out who the person you're dealing with does not want to get a phone call from.
You know, he brought up a good question, too. Does the CDC realize that their guidelines are being taken out of context?
Yes.
They do.
They do, and they make these little mea culpas every now and then. But instead of really coming out strongly and saying, stop the horror in this country, they don't do that.
Yeah.
They just issue these little statements. Oh, we never meant it that way. Oh, these are all voluntary. And you can collect these statements and take them to the doctors. But I think the thing to do is to say, okay, here are the CDC regulations. Print them out, 50 pages, and say, where in here does it say that?
Mm-hmm.
Start pinning their feet to the fire. They're making this stuff up, and they're making it up because they don't want to get attacked by the DEA. The DEA is now snooping around pharmacies looking for patients that are only getting pain medicine. See, that's the new red flag.
Yeah.
God forbid
Pay
you're only
attention.
getting pain medicines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you need to be on 10 medications. Oh, that's okay. But if you're only on 2 pain pills, probably a doper.
So does that mean now, like if I go to a pain management doctor, not only do I have to be prescribed pain medication, but I have to be prescribed an antibiotic or something, like so they don't look?
Yeah, that'll so the DEA won't become suspicious. We're in an era now of red flagging people. It was kind of like during the communist era, the 1950s, and Joe McCarthy. Did you go to a party where there were communists? Uh-oh, you're a communist. There was a song at the time, if your mommy is a commie, then you got to turn her in. Mm. That's exactly what's going on now. Mm-hmm. People are so frightened of opiates turning people into dope fiends that they are just losing it. And they're trying to pass laws like they are in Oregon, which if you flew in here from Mars, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know how the McCarthy hearings ended? Somebody finally stood up and said, Senator, do you have no compassion? Or no shame? Senator, do you have no shame? And that's kind of what we need to do with public officials and what they're doing.
I agree.
See, they can't even identify the problem. What's the problem? Overdoses. Wait a minute. That's only in the addiction community. Oh, people becoming addicted. No, you're not going to become addicted. There's not a single case report of a person becoming addicted who's been on the medicine longer than a month. Because if you were on it a month and you were addicted, you'd be out in the streets. You doctors don't give enough medicine for people with addictions.
Let me ask.
So if you can't become addicted, go ahead.
If this bill passes, what does that mean? Like, not only for the Medicaid patients in Oregon, but what does it mean for patients in the U.S. needing pain medication for acute issues and long-term problems? What will happen?
Well, I would go to the Chamber of Commerce. And I would say to them, you know, the same thing's going to happen to you that happened in North Carolina with their bathroom law. You start spreading the word around that nobody who comes to Oregon is going to be treated with pain medicine, and people will just go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So that's an avenue of approach.
Which, by the way,
get the Chamber of Commerce involved.
I've talked to some people, and they're already doing it. In fact, this one lady, I'm trying to get her to come on. She lives in Oregon. She has like 9 different major incurable diseases, and they've cut her pain medications off all the way and her insulin.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's really bad.
And they're already doing it?
I think.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, there's the Note 60, but I don't know her specific conditions. But like I think 50% of Medicaid with back issues have probably been tapered down or off because of this Note 60. Some doctors say they won't do exceptions. Some doctors push for their patients and still make them work. But
I mean, she has like gastroparesis, arachniditis. You know what I mean? Like major stuff.
It could be, from someone pulling their back out to someone with arachniditis. I mean, there's no, it's all or one.
Yeah,
one
in
or
other
nothing,
words,
you know?
Maura, okay, again, fight back. Say, what back issues are you talking about?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the failed back syndromes after surgery?
Everything.
Are you talking about arachnoiditis? Are you talking about... Well, you can't, in other words, start turning it around. Show me. Show me what's going on. Because, see, they just get away with murder. They just make these statements and then say, well, with respect, Your Honor, Your Highship, where can I look this up? What you're saying. And those two studies they quoted, by the way, you need to go to those studies and you need to find out what references they're talking about.
Yeah, because
I actually did. I requested all the studies they used for the chronic pain task force.
And I can help you go over those, and then we can rebut those, because I think I've seen most all these studies. And the FDA said, the FDA said, hey, I see these studies that you're giving me, and I'm sorry, they don't work. The one thing about the FDA, they got some real powerful scientists there. Because they have to approve new medicines. I mean, this is not Mickey Mouse business, This is not tracking Zika virus. This is approving new medicines. You want to be sure you aren't going to kill people with them. So and I've talked to some of their consultants, and let me tell you, they're real high-powered. They're all at these academic centers, So, when the FDA scientists rule on something, you listen.
Right.
And they basically said cutoffs do not apply. At the CDC, actually, in the guidelines, if you can manage to get through them, at one point it says, do not take people off unnecessarily because it may be a medical legal issue.
And this whole chronic pain task force, I mean, half of their discussions through their 9 months of meeting is how to force taper as fast as they can.
That is not in the CDC guidelines. In other words, you can just go in there, make a 50-page copy and go in there and say, I'm sorry, where is it that says here about this forced tapering? And I'll tell you something, that is clearly not in there. And as a matter of fact, tapering isn't even in there. They bring it up, but they always say, you taper off the medicine if it's not working. Duh. Oh, gee, that's such new information for us doctors. I had never thought of that before. If I'm treating somebody with a medicine that's not working, maybe I should stop it. I'm glad they told me this. My God, all these years that I've kept people on medicines that weren't working. Well, that's what they say about opiates. And by the way, it's not just opiates. We need to use the word narcotic, because fentanyl, methadone, tramadol are not opiates. See, they don't know what they're talking about. You need to use the word narcotic. That covers all the drug medicines. And if the CDC had used the word narcotic, they wouldn't have to report their data like this. There were 16 deaths from opiates minus the methadone, but plus the fentanyl and not tramadol. I mean, that's, if you read their reports, that's what they say,
Well, and opioid's not even a word.
No, opioid. As a matter of fact, people say, oh, the word opioid's been around forever. No, it hasn't. They actually had to get an amendment.
It's like the Urban Dictionary for it.
Controlled Substance Act.
Right.
Wow.
They had to get it inserted into law so they could use it in Richard Nixon's Controlled Substance Act. It's an opiate or a narcotic, or the best word is pain medicine, because there's only one other pain medicine. It's Tylenol. believe it or not, of all the medicines we have, that's it. Narcotics and Tylenol. We've got a lot of other anti-inflammatories and blah, 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 but only 2 pain medicines.
So, Amara, if this passes through, what are they suggesting is the alternatives? What should somebody with an incurable, painful disease go to?
That's a good question. I mean, there's some of the recording that I have available on YouTube. Actually, the lady that told me about this task force, that's a pain representative, asked that actual question: what is a chronic pain patient supposed to do if they need to have more pain management? And their response to her was cognitive behavioral therapy and acupuncture and aquatherapy and mindfulness.
Well, then you say, and do you have studies to show that those are as effective as opiate pain medicine?
I would have said that if I was the pain representative, but she did not. No.
Are you going to be able to do that?
Yeah. And that's what we're, I mean, I think we've gotten hundreds of comments sent in regarding this. We have open letters from amazing professionals. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just absolutely honored and humbled by the amount of support that's come in, not just obviously in Oregon, but nationally. I think it just shows that everyone was at their limit. So I'm really hoping for transparency at this point from them. We'll force them into it if we have to. So.
Mm-hmm. Amara, see, that made me think of the coming back with questions. And you might mention this to your reporters. We need to have a plan for people who become suicidal as a result of having so much pain. And then, I have a collection of 30 people who've committed suicide, and you can obtain them by Googling medium suicides Kline. Or you can go to thomasklinemd.com. But, that's a real list. And a lot of people are saying, oh, no, you shouldn't publish those. Well, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. In the Vietnam War, they weren't publishing the deaths of the soldiers either until Walter Cronkite figured out they were lying. So, you can try to cover up people killing themselves, but you can read it on my website, and every one of those has been checked out and verified. So, sticking your head in the sand. So, you're going to ask the paper to do a story on what's going to happen after the law is passed
to
people
huge issue.
who, and I think you can maybe ask the Surgeon General to send in public health service doctors and see people that have been cut off by the state.
That's an excellent idea. As we have the Death with Dignity Act in Oregon. So it just started in 1997, and I'm just looking at the statistics from 2017. There were 143 reported assisted suicides in 2016.
Okay, well, the other thing you can do is say, based on other states and people killing themselves, it looks like we're going to have more suicides after this law passed. So we need to set up a commission in Oregon to provide more support for these people who want to end their pain by ending their lives.
We have a few more calls. Caller from area code 208. What is your name and what's your question? Hello, caller from 208. What's your name and what's your question? Hello? Okay. We're going to try another one. Caller from 808. What is your name and what's your question?
Hi, it's Valerie Hawk. Hi, Jonelle. Hi, Dr. Kline. Hi, Amara.
Howdy.
Hi.
What's your question?
I didn't really have a question. I just really wanted to thank Amara for what she's doing. And, she's worked so hard out there, and only a couple people helping her in Oregon. And they really need everybody to get out there. I wanted to bring a van load down from Washington, but it's just not going to happen right now. But we need everybody doing what Amara's doing and keeping their eyes open and looking at these websites and looking for these meetings, because they are hiding them, and they are there's no transparency.
Go public.
Thanks, Valerie. You know,
All right. Thanks, Jonelle. Thank you.
Amara, how did you form your group? Because I've seen so many groups come up within these communities and fail. And you guys came up quickly and you got it together. So how did you do this? How have you been successful? So we can copy.
Sure. Of course, I wouldn't take ownership of the group, but it was just kind of like an organic formation. I think that just people kind of collectively coming together and wanting to work on this at the same time. You know, there's an ebb and flow to it all, and you know, some people with being a pain patient, obviously you go in and out of what you're capable of doing, but I think we've really ramped it up, and of course, it's just kind of like, for me, my philosophy is we all try to help each other. So I've gotten support from all different groups and individuals and professionals. The Oregon Pain Action Group is where I've been posting all the updates. The people that tend to be in numbers that come to the protest that came to the Salem one last month. But I anticipate people coming from Southern Oregon on the one on Thursday, as well as Washington State, hopefully this time, in support. So I think this is going to be a really big turnout, I'm hoping, and a lot more media.
If people want to help out, how can they?
They can if they want to help specifically for Oregon, get to know all about Health Evidence Review Commission and the Oregon Health Authority. Get to know the people involved in making these policies. You could write them directly. You know, I know that the commenting period's over now, but things are kind of up in the air because we've got the voting pressed until, I believe it's October 4th. There's going to be another chronic pain task force meeting September 20th, which is just the task force members that we've all come to love that developed this policy. So, you know, we're strategizing right now on what to do next. And if anyone else has ideas, you know, we're looking for legal help, that's for sure. You know, good minds on this, good eyes on this. It's going to take, it takes a village.
Well, what is your actual plan of attack? Like, what's coming up next? Because I know you mentioned a few meetings. And by the way, they rescheduled their meetings, correct? So do you think they did that because they didn't expect that somebody would find out about this? And you know,
well, I guess they technically didn't reschedule their meetings. They just kept the one on. It would always been on the 9th. As the VBBS and the HERC meeting was always set on the 9th, but that was going to be the meeting they officially voted on the policy. The Chronic Pain Task Force was officially done with their meeting. And so on the 20th, the Chronic Pain Task Force, September 20th, that was something that they added in just recently, and like in the last week. So that was kind of unforeseen. And then in October, there's going to be another edition of the VBBS and the HERC voting on it, apparently. So we have, we have some time. We bought ourselves some time.
Okay.
And that was the whole point of doing the protest.
You're doing great. You know, hang in there. I just visited the Harriet Tubman Center in Maryland, and I didn't know that in addition to smuggling slaves out of Maryland, she led an attack by the Union soldiers on several plantations where they held slaves. She led the attack.
Wow.
You know, and so hang in there. And remember, the governor has to sign off on this. So that needs to be mentioned in your stories. The governor needs to sign off on this. And one last little suggestion, when people are talking about being in chronic pain, it's better to mention your disease. A lot of people think chronic pain is just made up. In other words, say, I have arachnoiditis as my painful disease, and use the word painful disease. I'm finding out that the folks on the street really do think that all this is just made up. It's in their head. And
really?
Actually,
unbelievable.
Some prominent prop member actually just recently said that, it's all in their head.
Wow.
Yeah. Well.
Well, I just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Speechless. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to wrap up here, but I wanted to give you guys both, time to say anything else that we might have missed. So, Amara, do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about before we get going here?
Oh, I mean, I totally agree with Dr. Kline, and I think a great focus of this would be for Oregonians to really bombard our governor with insight into what it is to be someone with painful conditions, things that don't get better, chronic illness, things that affect our lives greatly forever. And, not just for patients, but for loved ones and family members and children. It needs to go outstretched besides the patients who are, tired and that, don't have the energy for all of this sometimes. So we need some good, healthy bodies involved in this fight, too.
And people in the future. This is involving everybody in the future. If somebody has a teenager who develops lupus and gets horribly painful diseases, what's going to happen to them? Well, I will sign off by saying to you, Mark, give them hell, Harriet.
Thank you. Will do.
And thank you. You're doing amazing. And if you need anything, please let us know, because I would love to be able to help in any way possible. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, and send me any articles that you need reviewing.
Okay. Wonderful. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kline and Amara, for joining us this evening on the Doctor's Corner. Tomorrow night on Kline Nation, Claudia Morandi will be our guest. She is the founder of Don't Punish Pain National Rallies, which is coming up this September nationwide. And I wanted to thank you, Kline Nation, for joining us on another Tuesday evening here at the Doctor's Corner. I'm Jonelle Elgaway, signing off for the evening. Have a great night.
You've been listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Jonelle Elgaway. Copyright 2018 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.